The grandfather clock in the hall is the home's true heartbeat. It counts the seconds of my life with a deep, resonant tick-tock that the house has absorbed into its very bones. Each tick is a footstep in the past. Each tock, a slow march into a future I navigate alone. The air inside these walls is thick with the ghosts of yesterday, the scent of my late husband's pipe tobacco clinging stubbornly to the velvet curtains, the faint scuff marks on the baseboards where two little boys once raced their toy cars with furious, joyful abandon. My days are a tapestry of quiet rituals. I wake with the sun, my joints protesting as I push myself out of the bed that still holds the faint impression of a man gone 10 years. I water the geraniums on the windowsill, their cheerful red a stark contrast to the muted grays and browns of my life. The house is a museum of a family that was, each photograph on the mantelpiece, a silent testament to a love I thought was my life's great work. My afternoons are often broken by the welcome interruption of Arthur Henderson. He lives 2 doors down, a retired history teacher and, more importantly, the man who coached both my sons, Mark and David, in Little League decades ago. He's a widower, too, and we've fallen into a comfortable companionship, a silent pact to ward off the deepest shadows of loneliness. Eleanor, he'll call from my front gate, his voice a gentle rumble. I've made too much iced tea again. Care for a glass? He'll come in and sit in my husband's armchair, never commenting on the worn indentations, and we'll talk. Not about the hollowing ache of absence, but about his garden, or a book he's read, or the changing face of the neighborhood. He sees the dust on my picture frames and the slight tremble in my hand, but he has the grace to speak of the world outside, reminding me that it still turns. Today, as he sipped his tea, his gaze fell on a framed photo of the boys, maybe 10 and 12, beaming in their baseball uniforms, their arms slung around each other. They were good kids, Eleanor, he said softly. Real competitors. I smiled, but the image sent a ripple through me, pulling me back to a different time, a different sacrifice. I was suddenly 25 years younger, standing in the sterile, fluorescent-lit waiting room of a university financial aid office. David, my youngest, my brilliant artistic boy, had been accepted into a prestigious art program on the other side of the country. We were ecstatic, but the acceptance letter came with a bill that made my breath catch. We didn't have it. My husband had just been laid off, and my salary as a librarian barely covered the mortgage. I remember David's face, the light dimming in his eyes as he said, "It's okay, Mom. I can go to the community college here." But it wasn't okay. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with my own acceptance letter, one I'd kept tucked away for years. I had been admitted to a master's program in library science, a dream I had deferred to raise my children. The tuition money I had painstakingly saved, dollar by dollar, sat in a savings account. It was the exact amount David needed for his first year. I looked at the letter, the crisp paper representing a version of my life I had always longed for, and then I looked at the phone. The next morning, I withdrew every cent and wired it to David's university. I never told him where it came from. I just said we'd figured it out. He cried with relief, hugging me so tight I could barely breathe. That sacrifice was the cornerstone of my motherhood, an unquestioning gift. I would have given them anything. I came back to the present with a jolt, the condensation from Arthur's glass leaving a ring on the polished wood of the end table. I glanced at my phone, sitting dark and silent on its charger. It had been 3 days since my last text to Mark. "Just checking in, honey. Hope you have a good week." The little blue bubble remained, unadorned by the 3 dancing dots that signal a reply. The distance was more than just miles now. It was a vast, cold chasm. The boy who once couldn't sleep without me checking for monsters under his bed now couldn't find 2 minutes to answer a text. The contrast between the memory of my sacrifice and the reality of this silence was a physical ache, a tightening in my chest that had become all too familiar. The tightening in my chest wasn't just metaphorical. It started as a dull ache and escalated over the course of an afternoon into a crushing weight, as if a vice was being clamped around my ribs. A sharp, searing pain shot down my left arm, and a wave of nausea left me dizzy and breathless. I stumbled to the armchair, my hand pressed against my sternum, each heartbeat a painful, irregular thud. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through the fog of pain. My sons. I needed my sons. My fingers, clumsy and trembling, fumbled with my phone. I managed to pull up Mark's contact, his smiling face in the profile picture a cruel mockery of the moment. I pressed the call button, my breathing coming in ragged gasps. The phone rang, once, twice, a shrill, hopeful sound in the suffocating silence of the room. It rang a third time, a fourth. Then voicemail. Hey, you've reached Mark. Leave a message. The automated voice was a sterile, indifferent dismissal of my terror. My thumb shook as I tried David's number. The same agonizing series of rings. The same hollow journey into the digital void of his voicemail. I tried to speak, to leave a message, but the words wouldn't form. A strangled sob was the only sound that escaped my lips before the pain intensified, stealing my breath entirely. The room began to swim, the edges of my vision blurring into a dark tunnel. I was sliding from the chair, the polished wood floor rushing up to meet me. I remember thinking, with a strange, detached clarity, that this is how it ends. Alone, in a house full of memories, waiting for a call that would never come. My last conscious thought was a desperate, silent plea, not for my sons, but for anyone. Let someone find me. It was Arthur who found me. He had come by with my mail, as he often did, and saw my front door slightly ajar. He told me later my face was gray, my lips tinged with blue. He didn't hesitate. He called 911, his voice calm and authoritative, a stark contrast to my own panicked, failed attempts to reach my children. He knelt beside me, holding my cold hand, his voice a low, steady murmur until the paramedics arrived. He was the one who rode in the ambulance, who gave the doctors my medical history, who sat in the stark, impersonal waiting room during the long hours of my emergency heart surgery. He was my anchor in a terrifying storm, a neighbor who had become, in my moment of greatest need, my sole protector. The confirmation of their betrayal didn't come in a dramatic, face-to-face confrontation. It came as a text message, delivered to Arthur's phone as I lay in the ICU, a web of tubes and wires tethering me to life. I was awake, groggy and sore, when Arthur showed it to me, his face etched with a quiet fury he couldn't quite conceal. It was from Mark. So sorry to hear about Mom. David and I were at the championship game, huge deal for us. Had our phones off. We'll try to get a flight out in the next few days if we can get away from work. Let her know we're thinking of her. A game. They had missed my desperate calls, ignored the silent alarm of their mother's life hanging in the balance. For a game. The words blurred on the screen, each one a separate, poisoned dart. A huge deal for us. The casual selfishness of it stole what little breath I had. Arthur placed a hand on my shoulder, his silent presence a comfort that only magnified their glaring absence. The days that followed were a blur of pain, medication, and the slow, arduous process of recovery. Arthur was a constant. He brought me clean pajamas from my house, a dog-eared paperback, and updates on his prize-winning roses. He would sit with me for hours, sometimes talking, sometimes just reading in companionable silence. It was in those quiet moments, with the steady beep of the heart monitor as our only soundtrack, that I began to truly unravel the tapestry of my life, to see the threads I had so long ignored. They were good kids, he had said, and they were. I let my mind drift back, past the recent years of neglect, to a sun-drenched afternoon at a lake. We were at the cabin we used to rent every summer. David, who must have been about 7, was terrified of the water. Mark, always the braver one, was already splashing near the shore. I saw the longing in David's eyes, the desire to join in warring with his fear. I took his hand. "Come on, Davy," I'd said gently. "I won't let you go." We walked into the cool water together, step by agonizing step. When it reached his waist, he froze, his small body trembling. I held him close, whispering reassurances, telling him about the funny-looking fish and the smooth, skipping stones. Slowly, his fear subsided, replaced by a tentative curiosity. By the end of the afternoon, he was floating on his back, his face turned up to the sun, a look of pure, unadulterated joy on his face. He had trusted me completely. We were a unit then, a fortress of love and mutual reliance. The memory was so sweet it was agonizing, a ghost of a love that felt utterly disconnected from the men who chose a game over my life. That memory opened a door to another, one I had kept locked away. It was from Mark's first year of college. He'd called me, frantic, a week before his finals. He'd overspent his student loan and was about to be evicted from his dorm. The shame and panic in his voice were palpable. My husband and I had our own struggles. A recent medical bill had wiped out our savings. But Mark was our son. He needed us. I did something I never thought I would do. I pawned my grandmother's necklace, a delicate gold locket that was my most treasured possession. I told myself it was just a thing, that my son's well-being was what mattered. I sent him the money, and he was effusively grateful, promising to pay me back as soon as he got a summer job. He never did. A few months later, I saw a picture of him on social media, on a spring break trip to Mexico with his friends. He was wearing an expensive new watch. I remember the sharp, sick feeling in my stomach, a cold premonition. I had dismissed it then as youthful irresponsibility, a momentary lapse in judgment. I had made excuses for him, for both of them, my entire life. But now, seeing it through the lens of their latest, most profound betrayal, I saw it for what it was, a warning sign. A crack in the foundation I had refused to acknowledge. Lying in that hospital bed, the rhythm of the machines a constant reminder of my own fragile mortality. The pieces clicked into place. The sacrifice of my dream, the pawned necklace, the endless, one-sided river of love and support flowing from me to them, with barely a trickle coming back in return. I had built my entire identity around being their mother, their rock, their unwavering champion. But in doing so, I had allowed them to see me not as a person but as a resource, an endlessly renewable well of support from which they could draw at their convenience. The game wasn't an anomaly. It was the culmination of a lifetime of my own making. I had taught them that my needs were secondary, that my life was a supporting role in the grand drama of their own. A cold, hard clarity washed over me, chilling but also profoundly liberating. My love had not been enough. My sacrifice had not been enough. It was never about what I gave but what they were willing to take. And in that sterile, quiet room, a new resolve began to form, not of anger, but of a quiet, unshakable purpose. The idea came to me not in a flash of anger, but in the quiet stillness of my first night back in my own bed. The house felt different, bigger, emptier. The photographs on the mantelpiece no longer looked like cherished memories, but like relics of a forgotten civilization. This house, the place where I had poured my life, my love, my savings, was meant to be their inheritance. A final gift. But the gesture now felt hollow, a reward for a loyalty that didn't exist. My gaze fell on the armchair where Arthur sat nearly every day, and the idea began to bloom, simple and clear. The house wasn't just bricks and mortar. It was security, it was a legacy. And it belonged not to the sons who had abandoned it, but to the man who had shown up. When I presented the idea to Arthur a few days later, over a cup of tea he insisted on making, he was taken aback. "Eleanor, you can't be serious," he stammered, his face flushing. "That's your family home." I reached across the table and placed my hand over his. "You are the one who has acted like family, Arthur. You were here. That's all that matters." I explained my plan not as an act of revenge, but as an act of redirection. I wanted my life's biggest asset to go toward someone who embodied the values I held dear: kindness, loyalty, and simple human decency. Seeing the resolve in my eyes, he finally, reluctantly, agreed. The process was surprisingly simple, free of the dramatic legal battles I might have imagined. It wasn't about rewriting a will. It was about the present. I contacted a local community land trust, a nonprofit that helps facilitate affordable housing and community spaces. My plan was twofold. I would sell them the house for a nominal fee, a single dollar, under the legal condition that Arthur Henderson be granted the right to live in it, rent-free, for the remainder of his life. After his time, the house would be used by the trust to provide affordable housing for teachers in our community. The symbolism felt right. A final nod to both my husband's and Arthur's dedication to education. The day I signed the papers was bright and clear. Arthur stood beside me, his presence a quiet pillar of support. There was no fanfare, Just a simple notary and the head of the trust, a kind woman named Sarah. As I signed my name, a feeling of profound peace settled over me. It was a strange sensation, like taking off a heavy coat I hadn't realized I was wearing. I wasn't losing a home. I was liberating myself from a lifetime of misplaced obligations. I was finally investing in a legacy of kindness, not of blood. Mark and David arrived 2 weeks later. They must have caught wind of the property transfer through some public record search. Mark's car, a sleek, expensive sedan I knew I'd indirectly paid for, pulled up to the curb with a screech. They stormed up the walkway, their faces a mask of manufactured concern that barely concealed the panic in their eyes. "Mom, what the hell is going on?" Mark demanded as soon as I opened the door. "We saw the house was transferred. Are you okay? Did someone take advantage of you in your condition?" David hovered behind him, wringing his hands, his artistic sensitivity now curdled into a kind of weak-willed anxiety. "We were so worried," he added, his voice thin. I stepped back and let them in, my heart beating with a calm, steady rhythm. The old panic, the desperate need for their approval, was gone. Arthur was in the garden out back, but he could see us through the kitchen window, a silent, distant witness. "I'm perfectly fine," I said, my voice even. "I decided to give the house to the Community Land Trust." Mark stared at me, his jaw working. "You what?" "The house is worth a fortune. That's our inheritance." The word hung in the air between us, ugly and exposed. Inheritance. Not home. Not a place of memories, but a line item in their financial planning. "An inheritance is a gift," I replied calmly. "It's not an obligation. I chose to give my gift to someone who valued it, to an organization that will use it for good, after providing a home for a man who saved my life." David finally spoke up, his voice cracking. "But we're your sons. We love you." I looked at him, at the man my little boy had become, and for the first time, I saw him clearly, without the softening filter of a mother's love. I saw a man who defined love by its convenience. "Love, David?" I said, the question soft but sharp. "Love doesn't turn its phone off during a championship game. Love doesn't wait 2 weeks to check on a mother who just had heart surgery. Love shows up." Arthur showed up. "You didn't." They stood there, speechless, the raw, unvarnished truth finally stripping away their excuses. In their shocked silence, I felt nothing but a quiet, profound relief. The final chain had been broken. A year has passed. The house is no longer my burden, but Arthur's sanctuary, and he has brought it to life in a way I never could alone. His roses climb the trellis by the porch, and the sound of classical music often drifts from the open windows. I moved into a small, manageable apartment downtown, and to my surprise, I've never felt more at home. My new life is filled not with the ghosts of what was, but with the vibrant reality of what is. I volunteer 3 days a week at the public library, surrounded by the smell of old paper and the quiet hum of discovery. Arthur and I are co-chairs of the Community Trust Scholarship Committee, reading applications from bright young students who want to become teachers. Last week, we sat on a park bench, laughing until tears streamed down our faces over some silly story from his teaching days. It was a pure, uncomplicated joy I hadn't felt in years. I sometimes think about the life I built, the one that crumbled so spectacularly. The pain of my son's betrayal was the most profound of my life, a wound so deep I thought it would consume me, but it didn't. Cracked me open, forcing me to see the world and myself in a new light. I am no longer just a mother, a caretaker, a well of endless sacrifice. I am Eleanor, a woman who found her strength not in what she gave away to her children, but in what she reclaimed for herself. My true legacy isn't the house or the money I saved. It's the peace I found in letting go, the purpose I discovered in redirecting my love toward those who truly deserved it. It is the quiet, unshakable knowledge that I transformed the greatest pain of my life into my greatest act of freedom.